Okay, thanks for coming. Today my talk is actually going to be about 20 years of non-native tree removal and restoration on the Presidio coastal bluffs in San Francisco. And since we're in a group talking about essential ingredients on projects, I'm going to be talking about essential ingredients for implementing a successful tree removal project, and also for looking back at some historical data sets. There we go. That looks good. You said that this button is the...
Let me do it.
It just goes ding, ding, ding. I can just use the... All right, there we go. So what am I going to talk about? So first I'm going to get into a little bit of history. I'm going to do some botanical name dropping, including talking about CNPS's historic role on the Presidio. I'm going to also get into the history of natural resource management on the Presidio coastal bluffs and vegetation monitoring on the Presidio coastal bluffs. Then we'll get into the essential ingredients part, where I'm going to look at a 2011 case study where we removed 4.5 acres of trees on the bluffs, and also essential ingredients for revisiting a historic data set, and the results of our resurveying efforts. So a little background on the Presidio. There it is. The big red arrow points to the habitat island, which is the Presidio, surrounded completely by San Francisco, the Bay, and the Pacific Ocean. There's a lot of history there. The Europeans have been there for over 200 years. They started in 1776 with a Spanish outpost, and eventually it transferred to the GGNRA, to the Army. And then from the Army in 1994, it became a national park, part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. So when the Army was there, they did a lot of stuff, including this up in the corner here is an incinerator on the coastal bluffs where they burned trash and medical waste. And also down at the bottom, you'll see these little circles are on some non-native trees that they planted that proceeded to move into other parts of the Presidio, including the Presidio coastal bluffs. And also, if you were in Lou's talk over that way, he was talking about the Presidio being a biodiversity hotspot. So we have a lot of rare plants there as well, especially on the Presidio coastal bluffs. So here's the name dropping part. There's Shimiso, looking good with his hair. I don't know how that was ever missed out. But anyway, so type specimens. There are over 100 type specimens taken from San Francisco, and a lot of them were collected by Shimiso, and a lot of them were collected in the Presidio. Now, the bounds of the Presidio were probably a little different then, so we can't say exactly how many were from the Presidio, but we know there were a lot. CNPS was really active even in the 60s. I guess they were working on Raven's Manzanita in the 60s during the Army tenure, and they worked all the way up into the 90s. The Howell and Raven and Eastwood, the Presidio was like their botanizing playground. So this is a really special place in botanical history as well. So when the park took over the Presidio, CNPS was really key in lobbying for getting really good amount of natural resource staff for the Presidio. They protected a lot of the native plant communities. They actually put fences around them, which we've learned that's maybe not exactly the best thing, but they were really trying to focus on protecting those places. And a real key thing that they did was they pushed for a vegetation resource study that was conducted by Mike Vasey in 1993. So that 1993 study, that was when it started actually. That was a baseline inventory of the terrestrial vegetation in the natural areas of the Presidio. And what he did was a systematic search technique conducted at different times of the year, and he collected presence-absence data only and designated whether it was indigenous or non-indigenous. And then he created a natural vegetation map with polygons defined using the Holland vegetation type. And then he tried to do a historic species comparison to the plants of California by Howell from 1958. He took voucher specimens, he photographed stuff, and he really hoped that this could be used as a means of comparing species richness in those different community types in future years. So here's his map that and I'm not expecting you to be able to see that, but there's his map. So the main points, he determined that 14 of the natural communities observed by Howell in 1958 were still in the Presidio, and that likely 5 of them had been extirpated. He'd find 71 different vegetation polygons, 228 indigenous, 161 non-indigenous species across the 210 acres of the entire Presidio. And although 10%, less than 10% of the Presidio's natural areas remained, 73% of the historic species were still there. He was really concerned at this time that it was becoming a park, but he really wanted the park to be paying attention to species loss and conservation of these particular places. So he made some predictions, and based on a species area curve from the 1960s, he made this prediction. We might theoretically expect approximately 72 more vascular plant species to disappear from the Presidio in the relatively near future unless more natural habitat is created or remaining natural communities are carefully managed to maximize species persistence. So that's a predicted 23% decline in native species richness. So, zeroing in on the Presidio coastal bluffs, you can see down on the bottom, that's it. It's about 65 acres. Golden Gate Bridge is here. And he found 6 community types were defined in 1993 for the Presidio coastal bluffs. And like I said, it's a biodiversity hotspot in the Presidio. And of all the GGNRA, this particular area is known to have the highest concentration of rare, threatened, and endangered plants in the whole GGNRA. It has serpentine soils, it has dunes, and so it also has a lot of threats. There's remediation that needs to happen in this, or that has happened in that area, and there are a lot of unintended consequences of the surrounding, while they're coming in with their equipment and disturbing. Those non-native trees that the Army planted, a lot of those have not stayed. There's Monterey pine and Monterey cypress, and they've moved down onto the bluffs. Cape ivy and other weeds are definitely there. Infrastructure, there's trails, there's roads adjacent to it, and a lot of social trails, because you can see that big beach down there at the bottom if people want to get down to that. So I said that we've been there, the European Americans have been there for 200 years, but the last 20 we've been doing a lot of stuff out there, including tree removal, those non-native trees, ongoing weeding with staff and volunteers. Just on the Presidio coastal bluffs themselves, that 65 acre, there are 7 remediation sites that have all been remediated. There's social trails and encampments have been removed. Cape ivy has been removed. We've done rare plant expansions and reintroductions in that area as well. So all this work, don't worry, there's plans, lots of plans. The recovery plan for serpentine soil species, recovery plan for the coastal plants of the northern San Francisco Peninsula, the vegetation management plan for the Presidio, the trails and bikeways, and all this is our compliance and also guiding our work. So, this is my case study, and I think it was really successful. So you can see, hopefully you can see in this picture, the trees all come all the way down like this over here. There's 4.5 acres of trees removed. This place that goes down like this, that's Valley of the Serpent. You can see this is our little project logo. All the construction guys get their little stickers, and I wanted one, so somebody made this for me. There, 4.5 acres of non-native trees. We worked on Cape ivy over 9.1 acres, and we removed over 3,000 feet of social trails for this project. Lots of challenges. Adjacent to the coastal bluffs, these guys, are historic forests. A lot of those forests require protection. We've got to take care of those trees, even though they're not native. Different mission for that part of the land. So we're concerned about wind throw in those forests. Insane access. I should have blown this picture up because you can see there's a guy right there, there's another guy there. These trees are down, cables, pulleys. There's a cable coming down like that. Totally insane access. There were people worried about the stability of infrastructure. This is the Pacific Overlook, which is right on the bluffs above where we took out trees. They didn't want to lose those off the side of the cliff. Also, there's Robb Hill Campground is right there, and all those kids are camping under trees. We have an active and affluent public, which is great as long as you're messaging correctly and you connect with them well. and they're underside. And there's also past extirpations. This is a rentit, which even though it's not found, typically in the tree areas, it was a species that had for a while sort of blinked out in much of San Francisco, and so there's a perception of taking out trees is going to affect birds. But actually our project's going to help prevent it. So, and one other thing, trees are pretty and good. We all know that people like to look at them, they're charismatic megafauna. Megaflora, that's what I meant. All right, here's our essential ingredients. Good contractor selection. These guys were great. They definitely were really behind us in our work. Make sure you do your homework. We commissioned a wind study to make sure that we were going to be protecting those forests. We tied our work to a trail and trail corridor improvement, so view sheds, and you get a lot of people supporting you that might not have originally. And also, we weren't shy to do one-on-one meetings with key stakeholders, community groups, Audubon, and also we have an on-site community engagement present during the entire project. So that person that's there talking to those folks is actually there just to talk to people about what our project is. Okay, also, thinking out of the box, we used cargo nets to remove duff out of the Valley of the Serpent. We found places that might seem like pretty marginal protection, places to protect, but actually once the duff is removed, they're the cornerstone of the restoration. Oops, oh, it finally worked. Sustainability, 200 fence posts, 9 benches, we brought 15 logs for creek restoration projects. We really capitalized on that, reused wood chips, 9 cords of firewood to Rob Hill Campground. And also we really took advantage of the equipment that was on site. You can see that before, this area is completely covered in Cape Ivy. And then after, we used these machines over here to actually pull that out. We got pretty aggressive. It was great. The Cape Ivy piles were composted. We didn't have to deal with them on site. Oh. There we go. Okay. How about to the restoration? We actually had minimal active, I think this is a really important point, minimal active revegetation. We actually waited to do our replanting and waited to see what the seed bank would deliver, and it really did deliver. And we also didn't get excessive with the erosion control. Perception is that you need to put a lot down. Just do what you need and really allow that seed bank to come back. We had a lot of micro weeding, more weeds than we would normally weed in the first 2 years, really to create space for those native plants to come back instead of the invaders that are really quick to jump in. And then getting rid of duff, you can see a great before and after there along the bottom. What did we observe? We found the oldest bottle in all the Presidio from the Spanish, crazy native recruitment. You can see Cicericium coming back. When the site looks good, the public is happy. So seeing us out there working really got a lot of people behind us, what we were doing. And the Cape Ivy, like I said, the follow-up actually on the mechanical removal was way less than in places where we did a more typical scorched earth method. And we are seeing habitat that the rented is really going to like coming back. Michael Chasse is in the bottom there, and that part is around the Franciscan manzanita. We planted 6 of those. That was the one that they thought was extinct, and they found it Doyle Drive. And all 6 of those locations are where there once were trees and would not have been places that we could plant it. And other species are coming in. Centromadia hadn't been seen in the Presidio since the 1850s. So what about VASEY'S prediction? Is it true? After 20 years, can we go back and look, and what if we recreate his study, and are we going to see species richness declining like he predicted? And can we link it to our restoration or to overall site condition? So we hired the fabulous URS, Anna Larson, who's probably here, great botanist, and Julie Gehring did a lot of the number crunching, and they went out and recreated that study. And there were a lot of issues with that VASEY study from 1993. I mean, what he did was a lot, but there was no cover data. It was just species richness, and the original polygon boundaries were a bit rough. The only areas that he mapped as forest areas are ones that had historic tree plantings. There were some incomplete data sets, there was no minimum mapping unit, and there was no way this survey effort amount wasn't quantified, so we couldn't do an apples to apples comparison to make sure Anna was botanizing just as much as Mike was. And once we got Anna's data back, we basically we grabbed some other data sets, VPOD, BioBlitz, and made sure that we had a really complete list from 2014, and then we compared it to the locally significant plant list, the CNPS rare and endangered list, historic records, and the weed management area priority and watch list species. And what did we find? We found that overall species richness actually increased. There are 96 more native species, 59 more non-native species, and that large-scale reduction, it isn't happening. Now, you have to take all that with a grain of salt, of course, because this is just richness data. And 6 of the new native species are rare or threatened or endangered, and no rare, threatened, or endangered species are lost. Lots new locally significant plants, and 4 of the new non-native species actually do fall onto that weed management area list. Essential ingredients, the presence-absence data is limiting but still useful. And in the absence of the cover community composition data, it's difficult to determine really the overall condition of your site. And you should definitely make sure to build a stronger case behind just limited data like this. You should utilize photo monitoring data and aerial imagery to qualify and quantify the change. So you can really see in that site from 2011 to 2013, very different, very, very different. And can paint a really big story. So the conclusions. Never underestimate the importance of good contractor and public relationships. We never could have removed, over 250 cubic yards of duff from that valley without that guy. It wasn't in the contract. He just did it because he thought it was a great idea. Don't throw the baby historic data out with the bathwater. Just because it's not perfect and just because it doesn't have all the cover data that you're hoping for, it still can paint a certain picture. And in this case, it was able to tell us that at least we're either VASEY was wrong, or we're doing something right. And if I did it again, would I do it the same way? What I would definitely say is take the time to do even a quick ocular assessment to quantify cover in your polygons. And also make sure you utilize those visual aids, take really good before and after photographs, and look at historic images. Thank you.